Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. My name is Chris Peterson, and with me is my co-host, as always, is Danny Gillette, and we are here from HuskerBigRed.com, and we're here to talk about some Nebraska football recruiting. It's been just a whirlwind this week, a huge week with fireworks and tons of news. Of course, Carter Nelson committing on Wednesday, a bunch of other commitments, Carlin Jones yesterday, Quinn Clark, a bunch of guys. Nebraska's now up to number 22 on the week. We haven't had our show since the Carter Nelson commitment, so we'll probably get some thoughts there. But Danny, how are you? How are you holding up here with all of this recruiting news?
My fingers are sore. My voice is tired from using my speaking software so much, but I love when it happens. I love the pain. It's good to have a coaching staff that delivers good news and one that is busy. And I'm hoping that during this dead period, all the staff members can get some sleep because they've earned it.
It does sound like, yeah, there is going to be that you speak of the dead period. Not a lot, I don't think, going on. I mean, Matt Rule basically told Sean Callahan like the last week of July, I wouldn't really even expect visitors for Nebraska. They're going to be, focusing on there's Big Ten media days, and then fall camp starts, I believe, July 30th. So I know that there's some recruiting stuff kind of going on right now, and we'll touch on that in a second. But it does seem like the coaching staff is moving forward and trying to, kind of get focused on the season here very shortly.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice to have everything sort of buttoned up before the season starts, just so they could focus more on the 2025 class because they're doing a good job of filling out, for example, this class, and then that'll give them time to prepare for 2025. And the more preparation they have, obviously, the better they'll do. And we've seen what they were able to do in 2024, you know, without even playing a full season yet, having just got here, so to speak, in December. So I'm excited to see what they do with yet another year under their belt for 2025. And to be quite honest with you, they did a pretty good job of, securing as many players as they did for 2023. So, I'm excited that 2024 is kind of um, finished in terms of recruiting, and now they can really focus on continuing to make that impact after a very, very solid 24 class.
It has been a really solid class, and we'll get to one of the biggest commitments here in a second. Just wanted to remind everybody, if you like our content, make sure you hit the subscribe button, get into the likes, and get into the comment section, so that more people can enjoy our Nebraska Cornhuskers content. But yeah, on Wednesday we had the biggest commitment of this class so far with Carter Nelson, the number one player in Nebraska. He's a top 100 recruit in the composite rankings. 24/7 Sports in their own rankings have him ranked 40th overall as the number 2 tight end, 6'4", 215. I know some people have been talking about how it's going to take 2 years for this guy to be ready for big time college football. I don't believe that to be true. It is going to take some adjustment from 8-man football, but at the end of the day, football is football. Athletes are athletes, and Carter Nelson, to me, I'm going to pose this question to you if you think he's the biggest commitment of the Matt Rule era. I personally think he is. I know Malachi Coleman's right in that conversation. That was a big one too. But when you think about the Nebraska Cornhuskers going head-to-head with the Georgia Bulldogs, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and beating both of those teams out for his recruitment and his commitment, I think that's what kind of sets him above the others, just because of who Matt Rule had to beat in order to get him.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think it's the biggest commitment of the Matt Rule era for a couple reasons. For one, we saw the 2024 class really, focus on in-state recruiting. They kind of buttoned up things in 2023, and to be quite honest with you, I don't necessarily count Malachi Coleman as a Matt Rule commit since the previous staff was already kind of working on him. Matt Rule did a good job of, making sure he was in. No mistake about that, but I consider Carter Nelson definitely the biggest commit of the Matt Rule era. Um, we've seen over the past couple seasons, Nebraska really kind of involve the tight end more in the offense. Travis Vokalek had a good year despite injuries. Austin Allen had a good year the year before, and both those guys are in the NFL right now. So I think they've done a good job of securing talent at tight end. And look, we got the tight or number two tight end, in the 2021 class in Thomas Fedoni. We got, I believe, Gilbert was number one in 2020, and now we have number 2 for 2024 and Carter Nelson. So that's a full tight end room. And I know that they won't necessarily overlap, but it shows that Nebraska has been able to kind of focus on getting playmakers at tight end. And shout out to Bob Wager. I mean, I think Bob Wager played a big role in this recruitment. He also got Gilbert to come to campus, so he's showing his recruiting chops as well.
Yeah, and I do think it's fair, with Nelson to talk about, him being an 8-man prospect. Since Nebraska, it's been I think a couple decades since they got an 8-man scholarship player. I think Nick Saban was saying that before he watched Carter Nelson's film, he'd never scouted an 8-man football player in his entire coaching career. So that is just giving you an example of, maybe just one reason why Nebraska has, there's just not quite the fertile recruiting ground in Nebraska as other places. But as someone that has had a lot of experience with 8-man football, it is, it's different than 6-man. It's closer to 11-man football than 6-man football. And at the end of the day, with Carter Nelson, yeah, he plays 8-man football, but he's also 6'4", 215. He runs the 40 and 4.5. He runs the 100 meters in 11:02. He high jumps 7 feet. Yeah. So, this guy's a freak athlete. And football is not, like we've said before, football's not a skill game, really. It really isn't. Carter Nelson, I've seen him catch the football many times. He knows how to do that. Like, you just have to get the ball in this guy's hands, and he's going to be a stellar player. It might take him a bit, but they're not going to, that first season is always an adjustment. Whether you play, major high school football, there's not a ton of guys who come in right away and contribute. So I think that they'll find a way to get Carter involved a little bit his freshman year, and then by the time he's a sophomore, I fully expect him to be starting. There's a reason why Georgia was on this guy like white on rice, and it's not because it's going to take him 2 full years to transition and be ready. That's just, if you think Carter Nelson's going to take until his junior year before he's able to contribute, you just don't know what the hell you're talking about. And there's a certain Nebraska Twitter account I'm talking about there, but it takes one to know one, if you know what I mean.
Oh boy, don't even get me started. Why did you have to say his name? But anyway, and Carter Nelson also has something that we both love in the fact that he was a 2-sport athlete in high school. He played basketball as well. So
3 sports.
Because he was track as well, wasn't he?
Yep, he plays basketball. And then he's also he does the sprints. He does like 3 jumps in track. So this guy's like full. Yeah. And when you talk, so the thing about 8-man football is Carter Nelson really doesn't even play tight end that much. He plays quarterback. He plays running back. He plays defense. He plays like, almost like an H-back type position, because that's 8-man football. You get and really any level of high school football, like, you need to get the ball to whoever your best athlete is. You need to get him the football as many times as possible. And a lot of times you do see kids, especially at smaller schools, like in Montana, you'll see this a lot. They'll play quarterback for their school, and then they'll go somewhere else and play like defensive back, because they literally just they had nobody else to play at quarterback. So you just put your best athlete there. And that's why once Carter gets a chance to really hone himself at tight end, and I think, a year or so, like, he's going to be a really, really good player.
Can you imagine trying to tackle a 6'4", 215-pound running back as a high schooler? like, no thanks, I'm good. I'll just let him.
That runs 4.5.
Yeah, I'll let him walk to the end zone. I'll hold his hand. I'll make sure he gets there safely. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. But, I think 8-man football also gives you a chance to see, the athleticism in different ways. You mentioned quarterback. You mentioned halfback. You mentioned tight end. So I do think that's an interesting advantage of 8-man football. You get to see the different traits that, each player has, and, how much of a workload he can handle too. He played everything in high school, so I'm just really excited about him. I love our commitment to the tight end position. I love tight ends. I love what they bring to the game, and this was just another big get for Nebraska during a month that they've been absolutely on fire.
Yeah, really on fire. Isaiah McMorris, Davon Hall, Keywan Lacey. The list just goes on and on of, big time gets. And we should get to, Carlon Jones, who committed yesterday, is another guy that I really am high on, out of Texas. There was talk of him waiting till the 1st of July to make an announcement, but, the Will Fong crystal ball came in, and he made his decision a little bit early. But this is a guy that, really, I think if he was 6'4", I think he would be a top 300 player. I really do. I think he's being underrated a lot because of
Yep.
the fact that he's 6'2". But frankly, I don't care. I mean, watch the guy's film
Yeah.
last year. 102 tackles, and this is Texas 4A football. I know the competition is sometimes inconsistent, but Texas 4A is pretty solid. And 13 sacks, 29 tackles for loss, and just seeing a defensive lineman with over 100 tackles. I mean, really at any level, that shows you a
Yeah.
lot of hustle, and the closing speed is really impressive with this guy.
Yeah, he doesn't move like a defensive lineman, does he? He
No, he
moves a lot
doesn't.
quicker than that. And I saw that he played a little bit of edge in high school as well, and he was just able to utilize that speed and make one or two quick moves, immediately blow by his offensive lineman and get in the backfield. And I really think he's an under-recruited player. With a lot of these players, and I know you mentioned, for example, like Quinn Clark, don't look at the offer sheet. Look at the talent that these players bring to the table, and Jones is one of those guys. I mean, I don't care what level of football you play at. If you record 102 tackles and 13 sacks, I want to take a look at you. I want to see what you can bring to the table, and I think Jones will be another get for a defensive line that has some good players coming up down the road. Tyson Terry in 2025, and another good recruiting job by Terrence Knighton, who's really getting after it on the recruiting trail as well. I believe he was able to seal a deal with Cameron Lenhart, kind of uh, refirm things there again. And then there was one more that he Princewell Umamalian was the other guy that he helped recruit. So Terrence Knighton has been showing his chops on the recruiting trail as well. So that's a big credit to him.
Yeah, he's we've talked about that a couple of weeks back with some of these recent commitments, but he has been doing a really nice job, and I think he's one guy that, should get more credit. I mean, we've talked about Tony White deserving more credit, but Terrence Knighton for sure has done really a spectacular job at the defensive line. I know Joseph Anderson is kind of trending to Iowa, and that is what it is. I did really like him, but yeah, Carlon Jones, just to close on him, I think he's a guy that I see him playing with his hand in the ground at Nebraska. I don't really see him as an edge rusher, but at times I do think that there's no reason you can't put him out there as a traditional D end, on the outside, and put his hand in the dirt and rush the passer. So I feel like he's going to get some opportunities there. I think he's like could be depending on the size, a 3 technique, 5 technique, but in this 3-3-5, you need versatile guys that can kind of play multiple spots, and I think he fits into that perfectly for Nebraska.
I definitely see him as a guy that will help collapse pockets and in turn blow up plays, running plays in the backfield, and make the quarterback think twice before throwing the football. So that's good enough for me. Again, Knighton did a good job. Bob Wager's done a really good job quietly of putting together this tight end room. So aside from just EJ Barthel and Garrett McGuire, it seems like the entire staff is having a really good month, and that's good to see a balance on the recruiting trail as well. And the fact that all of these coaches are able to connect with the players that they recruit as well.
For sure. It's the staff has done a really nice job. I wanted to circle back to talk about some other commitments. The other one that happened this week that's kind of been overlooked, but Quinn Clark. Well, Keywan Lacey actually too came this week, but Quinn Clark, a kid out of Montana, and I know there was a lot of talk with him and his interview where was like, I wasn't sure if I was able to ready to play Power 5 football or whatever. But look, once he ran that 4.5, I mean, Nebraska was sold. He's 6'5", 190. And the thing about him is I know he's listed as a receiver now, but I don't know if he'll be a wide receiver like in a couple of years. I mean, he really could, like, what if he's 6'5", what if he's like 6'5", 225 or 6'5", 230 in a couple of years? I mean, he really, he really has a frame that he could put on some weight, and he's a fast kid. So he could be, he could be another tight end by the time, he starts playing here at Nebraska, which could be really scary, or even just a bigger type of wide receiver. The one thing looking at his 100-meter times, I mean, I think his 100-meter time was like 11.6 or 11.8. That was just in track. But, it's hard to judge that specifically.
Too slow. Get him out of here. Get him out of here. He's too slow now.
Like for one thing, I mean, kids in Montana obviously like aren't investing that much time in track, which is another thing. It's also really cold here. And so I mean, I don't know what the days he ran, like the week, it literally could have been like 30 degrees, which isn't a great time. So, I mean, I would like to see, I am interested to see how that time goes forward. I definitely think he can run in the 11 range. I've actually seen, I mean, I've seen this kid run races. I've seen him at like the state track meet in Montana. I believe he does some jumping stuff too. So he's an athlete. I've watched him play. I've watched him, his best high school game, he had 208 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. I covered that game. It was a playoff game and his team was the underdog and they came in and pulled the upset. They made the state semifinals for the first time. They had a big lead. They had a 2 touchdown lead, gave it up. And then with like
Oh, no.
2 minutes left, yeah, 2 minutes left, they were down like 3 or 4 points, and he catches about a 50-yard pass and then a 20-yard pass. Boom, they got the lead. Game over. So I mean, he's the reason they won that game, and I just thought that watching, I remember thinking then like, well, this guy, I wonder who's gonna, like our Pac-12 school is gonna be interested in this kid, because a lot of great players in Montana. It's Montana State, and then Pac-12 or Mountain West. So I didn't realize at that time he had the connection to Nebraska, so that does make sense. And look, if Matt Rule believes in him, I'm fully sold. I think he's got the potential to be a contributor for Nebraska football if everything works out. Possibly, sure, he could be a kid that it doesn't, and maybe transfers out in 2 years. I mean, that's possible with almost everybody. But I think with Quinn Clark, the upside and what he can be is what Matt Rule is kind of looking at here.
I'll be surprised if there's no transfers from the wide receiver room at any point during the career of, their careers. I mean, there's a lot of bodies at wide receiver,
Yeah.
and but with that, comes the opportunity for a couple things. Quinn Clark doesn't necessarily, have to play right away. The coaching staff can work with him, the coaching staff can develop him, or they can use that time to say, hey, maybe we need you on the defensive side of football. Maybe you would be a better fit there. In other years, Nebraska has had to kind of scramble for depth at both positions, especially wide receiver, and they've had to force kids to play, in a spot they weren't comfortable with or just when they weren't ready. Nebraska doesn't have to do that this year, so now they have the luxury of taking a player like Clark, trying to see where he fits best, and even maybe possibly giving him an opportunity to play a couple games at the position, and then if it doesn't work, it's not gonna be a major hit to the wide receiver depth. And that's not a knock on Clark. That just speaks to how well the coaching staff has been able to recruit, the positions now.
Yeah, and the thing with Clark too, you make a good point about he'll be able to redshirt and kind of develop, and it's more he's got the bloodlines too. His dad. It's not like his dad was a Cornhusker great, and that stuff really does matter. I mean, I know that it's not everything, but there's a reason why like all the entire Matthews family ended up in the NFL, right? I mean, you see that sometimes it does matter. So I feel like when you're taking a bet on okay, like the bloodlines, similar with Keelan Smith, Neil Smith.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not saying that's the only reason, but like you can see what he can develop into, and Quinn Clark. I mean, part of it too. I think he's in Montana, so he's really he's not. There's not the same type of resources he's going to have at Nebraska in terms of weight training, the staff, all that type of stuff, the competition. So this really is a diamond in the rough, and it's like, yeah, he could turn into. This is a kind of the player that if you get him, he could have a really high ceiling, and it's like a boom or bust type kid. But I like that with this current class because I don't see a ton of those guys in here. I know some of these guys were camp offers and whatever, but a lot of these guys really can play. And that's the thing, like with Quinn Clark too. It's not like he hasn't. I mean, he had almost 1,000 yards receiving
Yeah.
last year. He had 12 pass breakups. He had like 4 interceptions. So these
He
are
was all over the place.
productive.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are productive football. Like Rex Guthrie is another guy that comes to mind. Of really, like, I don't know how that guy's a 2-star. I mean, to me, that's unbelievable. Like he's 6'2" or 6'1", 205, and runs the 4.43, runs the 100-meter in 11 seconds, has like 100 tackles, bunch of intercept. Like it's just, to me, there's just a scouting disconnect, especially in the West. And Matt Rule and his staff, if they see somebody and they can verify all the measurables and all that type of stuff, then they're not worried about what 24/7 or Rivals or any of those guys think. Like they're making their own evaluations, and I think that's going to pay off for them long term.
Well, for me, the guy that kind of has flown under the radar in terms of stars or whatever, if you even care, is Braylon Pruitt. I mean, you talk about a
Yeah.
guy that's undervalued. I think he's a guy that, is going to be a 4-star very soon. And, just speaking of 4 stars really quickly, and then we'll get to maybe Lacey. Daniel Kalen got his 4-star yesterday.
Yeah.
So, and I know people say, "Oh, who cares about stars?" And like, does it really matter? Not a ton. But for me, and I don't know about you, Chris, but for me, it's about putting proper evaluations on these kids, giving them the respect that they deserve for the job that they've done so far. Kalen obviously has a senior season still to go, but I mean, I feel like he got tremendously underreported at the Rivals camp. I mean, Nebraska fans had to beg the Rivals guys for coverage on Kalen. So to see him finally get that 4-star of respect, I can tell it means a lot to him just based off his tweets. He was really excited, and it's good to see him, kind of climb up the rankings and, kind of use that as a springboard into his senior season with two pretty good wide receivers. I think their names are Davon Hall and Isaiah McMorris as well.
Yeah, it is interesting with the ranking thing because it really doesn't matter, but it is like, it's a point of pride for the
Yeah.
fan base too. It's a bragging rights type of thing. But another part of it too is I think it's just a way to, compare recruiting classes. And to me, it's like Nebraska should get, like with Daniel Kalen, they should get credit for a blue chip commitment because he is that type of player to me. And I know he's still not a 4-star in the composite rankings, but 15th in the 24/7. So I believe he's in the top 24/7 now, which is their own, ranking. So he's ranked 225th overall from 24/7 and 15th among quarterbacks. So that's pretty legit. The composite rankings, which are 24/7, ESPN, Rivals, and On3, they have him like 480, and I think 34th among quarterbacks. So we'll see. He's not that far from being like there's guys ranked in the low 400s that are 4-stars. So I still believe when it's all said and done, by the time that Danny Dimes signs his letter of intent, he'll be a 4-star composite quarterback. That's what I think.
Which is your favorite recruiting service to use? Because I've used, 24/7 Sports. I've been using On3 a lot lately. Which one would you recommend for the fans out there?
I do like I go between Rivals and or not, excuse me, not Rivals. I don't like Rivals at
No, I
all.
don't like Rivals at all.
Rivals, the only I like Rivals more than ESPN. That's the only good thing I can say about Rivals.
Well, ESPN's awful too. So
Yeah, it's like they have one guy covering recruiting for the entire like I don't even know who does their rankings. So I like 24/7 still. That's my trusted one, because On3 did a weird thing with their they have the On3 industry rankings, which is kind of they actually are kind of smart because they did kind of they give more weight to 24/7 and On3. I think they discarded ESPN and Rivals a little bit. But I do like the composite rankings. I think they're the most accurate. But I like both of those sites. I think they both have really good reporters. I mean, Chad Simmons of On3 does a great job, just like Steve Wiltfong. I think On3
Brian
has
Munson too.
yeah. What I like more about On3 and where I think that they're better than 24/7 is like their database information. Like I
Yeah.
think it's easier to look at their visits and see like
Yep.
who's leading the prediction machine and stuff like that. So I think they're a little bit ahead in that regard. But overall, I think the rankers though, the analysts and stuff, I think the rankings at 24/7 are still better. There's some On3 rankings that are just still a little bit weird to me, and it's a difference of opinion, but and it's also how you want to look at it. Sometimes On3 might have a player ranked higher than, so maybe it depends on your school and all I know is that Rivals people seem to really hate Nebraska players. So
Yep.
that's kind of a weird thing.
No, it is, and that was evident with the Elite 11 coverage, and fans called him out and whatever. But I do agree with you definitely that it's easier on 3 to track visits. I do like the way they track visits, and I like the way the profile set up in the sense that you see the player's name and all the information and all the offers, and then you have the huddle highlights in the profile. So I think that's a little bit easier to find, but I do like 24/7 Sports rankings a little bit more.
I do like their rankings more. Another thing I like on 3 how you can see, visits and official visits
Yep.
very easily. You don't have
Yeah.
to sit there and count them up. They've got them listed. So that gives
Because
you a good idea of where, if a kid's visited somewhere 6 times and another once, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Plus it also stacks them up by date. So you can actually
Yeah.
see like, oh, okay, this kid,
Chronological order.
yeah, like, oh, he visited Ohio State 4 times, but it was like in 2022. You know what I mean? So I like them both. Those are the two I go to a lot. I should say, I don't mean to bash on. I like the inside Nebraska guys at Rivals. I think they do a nice job, like Zach Carpenter. Greg
Yeah,
Smith, who's
absolutely.
moved up. So it's not knocking those guys. I just think
Steve Marnick.
Yeah,
He's
I
really
just
good
think
too.
nationally, I just think Rivals is like, kind of going on the downward trend, especially with On Three coming up. So it's
Yeah.
just it is what it is. But
The national coverage is not good. I like the local reporters, and I'm
yeah,
sure and I'm sure you could say the same for a lot of the sites. I mean, not to go on a tangent here, but just like look at the national sports coverage and then look at the local sports coverage of basically any college program, and you'll see some things missed nationally that the local reporters absolutely hit on. So I mean, it is a matter of preference, but I do like the Nebraska Rivals guys, and I just don't like the national scale that Rivals brings to the table. I don't think it's very good, but who the hell asked me?
that's true. But I guess we asked ourselves. So, but in terms of recruiting opinion and analysis, you should definitely check out HuskerBigRed.com because we don't always break all the news, but we've got lots of we're quick to analyze it for you and let you know what it means. So that's why you should subscribe to this channel, check out our website, and all that. Although we are definitely building up our connections, so we've had a lot more inside info recently. So hopefully that'll keep coming down the pipe.
Hopefully, there's more info to come down the pipe. And
Hopefully
speaking
there's
of
another commitment down the pipe.
possibly, yeah, I mean, and speaking of commitments down the pipe, Grant Bricks is a guy that I'm really excited about. He was predicted by Brian Munson. I believe it was a 55% confidence score last time
Yeah.
I checked to go to Nebraska, and I heard that Bricks was gonna decide before his senior season. So obviously that's coming up, but to me that means like a August timeline. I'm guessing somewhere around there. I don't think he's gonna decide right now.
It doesn't sound like it. Yeah. So to give you a full scope of offensive line recruiting, in case you missed it, so there was a lot of things that happened on Thursday. There was Caleb Pyfrom, the in-state offensive lineman committed to Illinois. So that kind of got the conversation started. And then, Caden Massey last night committed to Kansas State, and that was interesting because, with Bricks, it's basically been said that it's Nebraska, Kansas State, and then Alabama's kind of in the mix, but it just doesn't seem like he
Yeah,
really wants to. Some kids don't want to go that far from home. Like that's just how it is. Alabama's a long way from Iowa. You know what I mean? Not just travel wise, but
yeah,
it's a lot culturally. It's a whole different place. So I mean that's one thing I don't think people factor into recruiting enough. Kind of like what you were saying with Carter Nelson. Sometimes kids do want to leave the state too. Like people have to remember these are just 18-year-old kids, and sometimes they have their own. They don't. Sometimes the decision's not always about football. You know what I mean? But at anyways, with Grant Bricks, it was interesting, that Massey went to Kansas State because I'm sure they would still take Grant Bricks, but Munson, got the prediction. Nobody else has followed. No Sean Callahan yet. No Steve Wiltfong yet. Nebraska does have the lead with the prediction machine. I do think they have the momentum, but we'll see. I mean, it's that last month or so is a long time, but he would be a massive getting kind of like, I feel like the missing piece for this, like if you look at the offense, I mean, they've got Keywan Lacey, who's an absolute stud, Carter Nelson. They've got three really good receivers, Kalen. I like all the offensive linemen they've got, but Brick's 6'5", 280, number 5 offensive tackle in the composite rankings. I think he's like 84th overall. So I think he actually would be Nebraska's highest commitment over Carter Nelson in the composite rankings. So that tells you how important he would be. And just
yeah.
man, to land the top player in Nebraska and Iowa, that would be quite the recruiting haul for Matt Rule.
And I want to get into Lacey in just a little bit, but as far as Bricks is concerned, I was looking, and I believe he would be the highest rated commit for the offensive line since Turner Cochran. Um, and that is certainly something to be proud of. And I think Bricks. I mean, he's just an absolute monster. He creates holes for running backs like nobody's business. He finishes plays. He can get immediate leverage with his hands and just knock defensive linemen down, and that's exactly what we need. You know, in terms of a physical running game and Big Ten football, that's what you need. And I'm hoping he can. I'm hoping he can decide. Not soon, but August. Like I said, I'm kind of guessing will be his time frame and I kind of got the idea that the coaching staff was a little bit out on Pyfrom, and I'm not too sure about Massey and how that exactly went down. But to me, it seems like they're putting all their eggs in the Grant Bricks basket, so to speak.
From what I've seen, there's and what I've read from others is that the staff wanted him to be more of a guard. They viewed him as
Yeah.
more of a guard, and so basically it sounded like they said that they were full at guard essentially. And so I think it was one of those situations where they did want Pyfrom. He was trending with predictions, but look, he took the other visits, and they had Peters and Davidson that committed, and so it's
Yep.
like you lost your spot. So that's how it goes. I think Illinois views him as a tackle maybe, or is going to get. So I think that was part of it too. And look, if I was a high school recruit, I'd probably want to play tackle too if I thought I could do it, because you have a better chance of making the NFL, and you have a better chance of making more money flat out. I mean, down the road, if that's like the way that he's thinking about it. I don't know. With Massey, I know that there was some talk Nebraska was like a lean there. So not with Munson. I think it was Mike Schaefer, one of the guys from Husker 24/7. So it's interesting. So that's what got me wondering, like, is there a connection there with Bricks and Massey? Like, does Kansas State getting Massey mean that Nebraska
Yeah.
is in the lead for Bricks? They do have the prediction now. The On3 prediction machine's like 73% to 8 for Kansas State now, but that's based
Yeah.
really on one prediction. So like, I'll say this about the prediction machine. Once it gets into the 90s, usually means you have more than one pick. Then I feel a little better about it. So we'll see how. It's just weird because it's not weird, but it would be nice, like if Bricks was going to decide, like in August, to try to say, hey, like get him, at the end of July for like an unofficial visit. I know they have another edge coming in at that time for a visit, but it doesn't sound like Nebraska wants to do a ton of recruiting stuff. So it'll be interesting. But they've shown, Matt Rule and the staff have shown that they can close with recruits very well. So I feel like they're probably, how you said, trying to get him to commit. I bet they're probably trying to push him to commit a little bit sooner and make that announcement. So we'll see what happens. But he definitely, I believe, is the top. He's the new Carter Nelson now. Grant Bix is the top guy on the board. He's the new Carter Nelson, Dylan Raiola. He's the new shiny thing. Like, let's go get him. And to me, if they get Grant Bricks, I mean, they have a couple holes to fill, but that'll pretty much be a wrap on 2024.
Yeah, that's all. Only 15 commitments in the month of June. That's it.
Yeah.
No, but the thing that I like here too is, and previous Nebraska football coaching staffs didn't do this, and I wrote about this on Husker Big Red a little bit, is when you have a quarterback like Daniel Kalen, who you view as the future, you want to put him in the best position to succeed. How do you do that? By building your offensive line, getting your quarterback playmakers, and getting your quarterback good running backs to help balance the offense. I mean, Alabama's quarterbacks, for example, aren't, probably the most talented and athletic, but they have a good offensive line, good wide receivers, good tight ends. So they have all the pieces around them needed to succeed. And that's important if you want to develop a quarterback. That's something that Nebraska, I always felt, didn't do a good job of with Adrian Martinez. Sure, we can go down the Adrian Martinez rabbit hole, but there were a lot of other factors too that kind of made his time at Nebraska a little bit of a bummer. And I feel like this coaching staff is, getting the pieces that Kalen needs to succeed and putting him in a good position to really kind of t- uh, take the next step and, become Nebraska's future quarterback for, several years.
Yeah, I think they've done a great job, building him, and he's done a great job of building this class too. I mean, that's part of it, is he's, made sure. He even joked with Steve Sipple that he is viewing recruiting as a part-time job right now.
Which is
So
good. I like that. I mean, look what he's done. He's gotten the two wide receivers. Probably had something to do with Carter Nelson. And I mean, if that's his part-time job, then hire him, put him on the staff.
yeah, and then with Keywan Lacey, I mean, just really quick before we kind of wrap things up here, but Nebraska, I think they definitely got a future starter in
Yeah.
Keywan Lacey. So I mean, you're looking at, and this is this was something I was thinking about earlier this week, just myself. But Nebraska, I mean, so some of these commitments. Now I know Quinn Clark obviously didn't have like the big offer sheet or whatever, but Carter Nelson had I mean, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, Notre Dame, Penn State. I mean, everybody was interested in Carter Nelson. Keywan Lacey, they beat out Ole Miss for him. So I mean, they're beating out some SEC teams for these guys, like Davon Hall. I know Tennessee came in late, but Tennessee still offered. And I feel like because they offered so late, I feel like that probably was
Yeah.
more of like a committable. Like I don't think they were just like messing around, being like, "Here you go," like I feel like that they know at that point, like either they needed to make a committable offer or they needed to like basically f off, and so they did. So it's like that's 3 recruits within like a matter of 4 or 5 days that had legitimate SEC offers that Matt Rule got to Nebraska, and I think that by itself is impressive.
We're hanging with the big dogs, right? And this is something we couldn't always do consistently in previous years. And as far as Lacey is concerned, I mean, I really, really like what I see here. He is a bruiser. He is a physical running back out of Lancaster High School, out of Texas again with the Texas pipeline, Lancaster, Texas. Actually, he finished 2022 with 730 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns, and those numbers were actually down from his 2021 statistics, which included, over 1,300 rushing yards and 15 touchdowns. So he's a guy that is absolutely, if you were to do a creative player for a Big Ten, I believe it would be Lacey. I mean, he just has that physicality to go along with the little elusiveness and the ability to run east, west, north, south really well. And so I really, really like Lacey. I know you talked about him last week as a guy that you really wanted to see Nebraska get a little bit more involved with, and they did.
They did, yeah, and it's I didn't expect him to have a commitment this week at all. So I mean that
No,
the way they turned that around really was impressive. This guy runs a 10.79 in the on 100 meters. He's I think 5'10", 205, so he is a pretty big back, but in some of his highlights he's like over 20 miles an hour running. So like this guy is
yeah,
electrifying. He's a receiver too. He reminds me, honestly, I don't, but he reminds me a lot of AJ Allen. He really does. A bigger, more physical AJ Allen, but just an explosive, dynamic guy. And so it was a disappointing to me when we lost him via the transfer portal. And I feel like, boom, we just got another really talented, Texas running back that can do a lot of the same things. That's going to be, joining this team next year. So Keyone Lacey, it would not surprise me at all if Keyone Lacey came in here 2024 season and made an immediate impact, just like AJ Allen did last year before he got hurt.
I feel like these Texas players are a little bit more ready than in some other areas, and that's not a knock on anything. I think it just goes to show the level of competition they play in high school, and also just the type of you know skill sets they have. You mentioned AJ Allen and Kawan Lacey being similar in terms of style, and I could definitely see that. I mean, they want physical running backs in Texas who have a little bit of speed and elusiveness, and it's evident that that mold is working coming out of state. So I really like this get from Lacey, and Ole Miss is not a joke program. So I think that was another huge win for Nebraska, and it makes me feel a little bit better about the state of the running back room, because this is Grant's last year. Anthony Grant, is that right?
I believe so.
I
I'm not
believe so.
100% sure though. I mean, I'd have to double check, but
Uh,
I think Gabe Irvin still has a couple more years. I
then we
think
have.
I think
Uh,
honestly, Ramir Johnson might have 2 more years. Honestly,
I,
with the COVID year and everything, I
yeah.
think he might. I don't know. I have to
Seems
check.
like he's done his like Logan Smothers. He's done his dues for this program. He's been
Yeah,
here forever. And then you have Quentin Ives, so it's going
yeah,
to be a very
and
solid backfield.
Emmett Johnson too.
Emmett John. Oh, I forgot about him.
I like him. So yeah, he's I think he's a little underrated. People forget about him a little bit sometimes, but I wouldn't surprise me if he contributed this year. I thought at the end of last year he kind of started working his way into the mix. So I'm still optimistic about his future. But in all, I really like, yeah, Ives and Lacey, the first 2 commits under Barthel, I think are both really dynamic guys and kind of give you an idea about the type of running backs that he's going to recruit.
And I mean, we kind of already know the type of running backs he's going to recruit, because he got a guy by the name of Saquon Barkley to the NFL, and also Miles Sanders. So I mean, Barthel has an eye for talent, and I really trust him. Again, I trust a member of the coaching staff with their evaluations and their ability to get the most out of the running back room, and that's something again we haven't been able to say in recent years.
That's very true. So something we have said a lot, though, and we'll say again, is make sure you guys hit subscribe to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. We appreciate all your support. We love to
Absolutely.
talk about the Huskers. So Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, get into the comment section, make sure you share so that your other, Nebraska followers that can catch our content as well. And we'll be back on Monday for another episode. And with recruiting maybe dying down a little bit, we'll start previewing the 2023 season a little bit. So looking forward to that. And kickoff is basically less than 2 months away. So really close. So as always, guys, thanks for everything, and go Big Red.
Go Big Red.